like to start off by introducing something to you all called high culture. High culture is the self-consciousness of a society, Robert Scruton wrote last year in The Guardian. It is the art, literature, scholarship, and philosophy shared amongst a group of educated people. Now, poetry is a subcategory of high culture due to its individualized, specific art form that different individuals can portray. Now, you're probably wondering why some chick is standing up here holding a pen, right? But I assure you what this pen represents goes much, much more beyond than what meets the eye. This pen represents the high culture that I have been found to so deeply explore. When I hold this pen in my hand, I can connect with art on a deeper level, and I can express myself in ways that I normally wouldn't be able to do without it. With this pen in my hand, and when I'm writing my poetry, I can give my thoughts a life. So throughout my life, I have given this pen a meaning, and with you guys listening, I will be sharing to you not only how poetry has shaped a whole culture and subculture, but how it has helped shape who I am today. So poetry connects to high culture because it's a form of art. If you guys have ever heard of Tumblr, then you guys know an example of high culture mixed with low culture, or high culture mixed with popular culture. Those blog posts you see and those reblogs you see are people expressing themselves online in a more alternative manner. So poetry actually has been around longer than that. It started in 3rd century BCE by a language described by William Jones as more perfect than Latin, more copious than Greek, and more exquisitely refined than either of them. Poetry also was used by ancient priests to remember ancient prophecies, and some of the world's sacred scriptures are actually made up of poetry. So it has a long history, and I say this to prove the relevance it still has today and how it evolved. So now, they didn't have pens back in 3rd century BCE, but they do today. And even though writing utensils have significantly evolved throughout the decades and years, poetry is something that has remained true to form, and it stayed in its purest form. So poetry belongs to the subculture, and that subculture is not at all mainstream, so most of you guys may not be particularly familiar with the subject of poetry and what it entails. But this pen to me represents the people that still practice poetry today and that still are passionate about it, people like me, and people I hopefully think that you guys will be too after hearing this. So here's a little statistic for you all. With an average of 10 poet students per graduating class section in the US, programs alone will produce over 20,000 accredited poets in the next decade. So as you can see, even though in our society poetry may seem lost, it's not dead. So I just discussed the history of poetry and how it evolved into its art form today. And now I will tell you why I personally identify with poetry and high culture in specifically. So as I mentioned earlier, I write poetry. Therefore, I consider myself part of this high culture. And I connect to this culture because I create art with my words. Now, that didn't always used to be the case. Actually, up until this point, I was a cheerleader in high school, and I hung out with what you probably know as like the popular crowd. So with that, with hanging out with the popular crowd came a lot of the same. Came a lot of distress and trying to fit into what I didn't really fit into. So I was kind of lost. From the outside looking in, it looked like I had everything, but deep down, I felt like something was missing, and I felt like I needed something more substantial in my life. So I was in a rut for quite a while, but when I realized that I had control over my choices and I could make the change, I decided to cut ties with all of those people that I thought were my friends. And even though that was the best decision I ever made, it left me feeling really lonely, and it left me with a lot of thoughts confuzzled in my head. So one day I just decided to grab this pen and write everything out and write my thoughts and feelings. So my poetry kind of started as a diary, and then it kind of evolved from there. So this pen is kind of serves as like a magic wand to me in a sense, because I'm more comfortable with myself and who I am as a person, and I kind of found my identity through my writing. So I can connect with others like me, and I think that's important because through my poetry, they can see the real me and not this image I'm trying to portray of myself. So now more confident than ever, I choose to separate myself from the majority to kind of create my own not so mainstream taste. Fitting in was too hard for me, so when I realized I didn't have to, I soared. I hope you guys have a better understanding of high culture and how poetry connects to high culture, and I hope you guys have a better understanding of who I am as a person. So I just discussed poetry and its art form, and even though it's not as mainstream of a topic today, that it's still beautiful. And then I talked about my personal experience and how poetry has helped shape the person I am today and helped me get through tough times. So I stress the importance of preserving the pureness of poetry, not only because it's an art form, but because I feel like it can help others express themselves too. And I feel like everyone should just get a paper out and write their thoughts and feelings, and then I promise you, you'll feel immediately better. And I think that's what's so beautiful about it. Nature's first green is gold. Her heart is hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down today, nothing gold can stay. I believe the most empowering thing we can do as individuals is to be ourselves, to be an individual, to stand out from the crowd, and there's too many copycats in the world. There's too many people trying to be like everyone else. So if you take anything away from this, I hope you take this one thing away. Express yourself, and express yourself in the truest form possible, because it would be a shame to miss out on meeting the person you're supposed to be. Thank you.